Right, Felicity, how are you today?
I'm absolutely fantastic, thank you. How are you?
I'm always good, always good. Right, today we're going to talk about financial abuse, and you are considered to be a specialist in the field of financial abuse.
Yes, I am.
Fantastic. So, in the layman's terms, what would you consider? What is financial abuse?
So financial abuse, in my understanding, is a subcategory of economic abuse. So if we understand what economic abuse is a behavior pattern that is used to coerce, manipulate, that causes economic harm to a
Okay,
person. So
but
you see that.
you speak about coercion and whatever. In a layman's terms, what does that mean? Can you give us an example?
Okay, so it primarily happens in relationships. So what would happen is the one partner is prevented from working, for example, and that is, no, you can't work. You need to stay at home and look after. The decision is made, or she's coerced into making that decision. So it takes away. She gives up her job, and she becomes economically dependent on her husband or her partner. Or he doesn't really want her to work, but he doesn't really say so, but he will hide the car keys, or he won't leave money for transport, so she can't go to work or she can't attend an interview. So it's very covert, but it has an economic impact on her because it limits her economic opportunities. So it's those kind, or you have a joint bank account and you're both working and you both contribute to a joint bank account, but you have no spending power. So the person who controls the bank account spends both your income. Um, Another example is that the one partner who has the power in the relationship would take out debt in the victim's name when they are not working. So they become liable for the debt, but they have no means of paying the debt because they depend on the person who is earning the income and they don't pay it. So the person gets a bad credit rating, for example. So that's economic abuse because that primarily happens in a relationship, and it's more about the behavior that causes impact on your economic well-being. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
It makes perfect sense. Thank you for that. And could you just expand a little bit more? How does it intersect with maintenance? How does it relate to specifically maintenance?
Okay, let's just go back one step. So, what is financial abuse? So, in my understanding, it is how money is used specifically as a tool to cause harm. So, as opposed to economic abuse, it's taking your car keys away that has economic impact. This is using money directly to cause harm. So, you see this a little bit in relationship, but more so post relationship. So if it's people who've been in relationship or who are not in relationship but have a child out of a some kind of relationship and post marriage. So when the marriage ends, um, there's a lot of abuse that happens that people are aware they're uncomfortable because things don't quite feel right. They don't understand what it is. So, for whatever reason, the relationship ends, whether the one party asks for the relationship or terminates the relationship, and has just reason to. Let's just say, for example, the one person is having an affair. So the spouse or the partner finds out and they end the relationship. The other partner agrees to end the relationship, but immediately when the relationship ends, so the financial support is withdrawn. And how this plays out in maintenance is the child is the glue that binds the victim to the abuser post relationship. Because if you didn't have a child between you, you could just part ways and go on with your life. But if you have a child between you, you're going to have some kind of contact, whether it's because of the financial needs or co-parenting. So what happens is the reward and punishment by using money is, well, I'm going to punish you because I'm not going to pay you child support. And that has an economic and financial impact. But the abuse aspect is not just how it makes you vulnerable, because you have to pay for shelter, you have to pay for food, that costs money, but it's intersectioned under the abuse cycle, because there's the emotional and the psychological impact that that has on you as well.
Thank you for that. And just Felicity, the awareness nowadays with all the GBV words going around and all the talks of gender-based violence, where does financial abuse fit in this whole construct? You explained a little bit now about the maintenance and how it impacts on maintenance, but how does it impact on the greater gender-based violence situation in South Africa?
Well, if you understand that financial abuse is intersectioned with many other forms of abuse, then you can see the intersections. For example, what is gender-based violence? It's gendered because in the majority it is impacts on women because of women's vulnerability. And the economic aspect of that is women, because we've been socialized to be the nurturer and the carer, and men the providers, that unequal power dynamic is always there, and it still exists even if women have got all the other rights. So women stay in relationships. So if they've given up their job, for example, and they have children and they're in a physically violent relationship, they can't leave the relationship immediately because they will not be able to provide the basics of shelter and food, for example, for the children. If they wanted to leave and their parents lived in a different province, for example, it would impact on the children's schooling. They might have a shelter, but they won't, it means changing children's schools. So victims don't immediately go, okay, I'm going to leave the relationship and remove them and their children out of the abusive relationship because of all of the impacts of the children. So the victim ends up staying in these abusive relationships primarily to be able to continue the children's safety and security. However, the children are aware that there's possibly physical abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, and we also, sometimes forget that there's a whole lot of sexual abuse as well. If you look primarily in relationship, just because you're married to a person doesn't mean to say that you're not raped. And kids become privy to a whole lot of these conversations. So if we look at the amendments to the Domestic Violence Act now, that if you expose your children to domestic violence, that in itself is a form of abuse now. So that speaks very specifically to a victim not being able to leave a relationship. And I mean, for me, I see the complications here. So if you do not have the financial means to leave an abusive relationship, how do you continue protecting your children from abuse that they are experiencing and that they're witnessing?
Sure.
Who's going to provide the victim with the financial means? The shelters are not enough. So what is the solution? Go to a family or go to a shelter. So, the economic situation, not everybody has the privilege of having family or having family who have the means to take in an additional person with minors. And the shelters are already full. We don't have enough shelters.
True.
The victims are almost compelled to stay. But over and above that is this innate desire to fix things that are wrong, even if we know that they're really wrong. So you would think about leaving the relationship, and then you leave, and then there's remorse, and then there's a honeymoon period, which is a typical abuse cycle, and then it's okay until the next time. And research shows us that women often leave 4 times before they leave for good, for many of these reasons. And one of the biggest reasons that they go back to abusive relationships is because of economic dependency.
Thank you for that, Felicity. We've basically come to the end of this first session. We will be hosting a couple of these talks. I think it's vitally important that we educate the people, South African public at large, about the specific aspects of financial abuse. And then next time, we'll talk about the signs of what to look out for in a relationship for economic abuse. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye.